In DC, we're just hoping that you listen.
Welcome, everyone, to District Divided, a DC sports podcast. I am Amit. That is KDot. Today's episode is about defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio. We're going to get into his time as a player a little bit, his time as a coach, a current coach with the Washington Commanders. Then we're going to touch on the newest article. There's one every week these days on Dan Snyder and the Washington Commanders and how they were doing business back in 2012 for quite a while. And then we are going to conclude the show talking about Dwayne Haskins a little bit. He passed away last week, only 24 years old, a very tragic story. So yeah, we're going to talk about Dwayne, but we're going to begin with Jack Del Rio, who has been the Washington Commanders defensive coordinator entering his third season now. So he's done 2 full seasons, and the first season was spectacular, and the second season, not so great. KDot, before we jump into numbers and stuff, what are your thoughts on Jack Del Rio and how he's done so far?
I think he's done a pretty good job. I mean, I think he's done a job that's comparable to the jobs that he's done in the past, especially a defensive coordinator. If you look at like his stint in Denver and you compare it to us, you have the first year. So you have, before he's the defensive coordinator, defense is shit. He comes in, you got one of the top ranked defenses. The second year, there seems to always be a bit of a struggle, which it happened in Denver there too. It happened for us last year. And then you come one there for the third year. So I guess this year, like a lot of things with the Washington team, is sort of a make or break as far as what it is that Jack Del Rio has. It's something you've alluded to here also, as far as Del Rio and last year, is the struggles, especially early on with the team. And that, I think that was something that was a little surprising. It just looked as though the defense was undisciplined, especially there on the front four, which Jack Del Rio to me seemed like one of those guys that commanded that sort of respect of the locker room, respect the players, and you think that he could be able to get through to those guys in that level, which it eventually, the tide changed as the season went on, but we had to deal with a lot of different injuries, Montez, Chase, all these different things. And by the end of the year, I mean, if it wasn't, once again, for everything that happened COVID-wise, I think that this is a team that was going to be, at least they could have played to anybody. I mean, you look at some of the wins that we had last year, they're impressive. You also look at some of the things that they had to deal with personnel-wise. Anytime that you're adding new guys to a secondary, there's usually going to be a learning curve. We had to deal with that, trying to figure out who was going to do what. Then there's also a dearth of talent happening at the linebacker position, which has been an issue. Landon Collins not wanting to play a certain position, then they put him in another position. He looks good, but he doesn't want to do that. Then he's hurt. It's a lot of different things that were happening last year that just didn't make it conducive to actually really taking a full proper step in the right direction. So I think this upcoming season has to be really the litmus test as far as what it is that Jack Del Rio is capable of with the talent that we do have on the defense.
It's also important to note that it takes 2 to tango. You can put any defense you want out there, but you are going against a certain type of opposition. The people and quarterbacks who were tangoing with in his first season were the likes of Andy Dalton and Ben DiNucci and Nick Mullins and people of that caliber, and a pretty broken Ben Roethlisberger at that point, who was on 4 days rest. It was almost like he was a starting pitcher because of the COVID schedule. They played the Ravens. All of a sudden they're playing us on a Tuesday or Monday or something like that afternoon. And then you look at last year. I mean, mother of God, how different it was, right? I mean, we're playing Patrick Mahomes. We're playing Josh Allen. They had that epic shootout in the playoffs. Tom Brady, and we beat him, right? I mean, Russell Wilson, and we beat him. There is just so much talent in 2021 that we went up against versus 2020 when we went against virtually no one. And when we did go against somebody, we often lost. Our team, like Ron Rivera, head coach, had mentioned, was ahead of schedule by winning that division, because guess what? We got a first place schedule, and guess what? We got murdered. And all things considered, it was actually kind of okay. So, I mean, in terms of defensive rank, I got the numbers over here. We were 29th, in passing defense, for example, which is tough. But again, when you're talking about going against these really good offenses, that's bound to happen. You mentioned new people in the secondary. Bobby McCain played really well in the final 4 or 5 games once he finally got settled in, for example. Cam Curl missed part of the season. COVID, injuries, these things happen, not an excuse, but just to say, hey, it is very easily explainable going from 2020 and this elite defense to 2021 and going, okay, we sort of got to check ourselves at the door a little bit.
Yeah.
So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I think that's it's all, and especially I also look at an offense that wasn't helping the defense at all, especially early on in the season, right? So you had an offense that was given terrible field position. They couldn't move the ball down the field. A lot of the offense would stall out immediately, or the turnovers that were coming the most inopportune times. There was a lot of that shit. And I think people don't do a good enough job of looking as far as how an offense actually helps out the defense and their ranking and having an offense set up the defense in best position. And I don't think we did a great job of that at all.
Yeah, it's a really good point because, and this is where Carson Wentz, let's see how he does, right? If we're maybe not converting on drives, but we're pinning people deep.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole lot better than what was happening sometimes last year, right?
Yep.
Everything is connected in that respect. We do have an easier schedule on paper, but as you know, in the NFL, things turn like that. You look at what Miami's done this offseason, maybe they're a really good team all of a sudden. It really depends on Tua, but in terms of the offseason additions so far, we haven't touched the draft yet. They look spectacular. Things change all the time in the NFL. So we'll see what happens. But a little bit about Jack Del Rio, and there are a couple little fun facts as well. So he was a linebacker at USC, where he played baseball as well as football. On the baseball team was Mark McGuire and Randy Johnson. So just there's one fun fact where it's like, holy shit, I didn't realize USC baseball in the 80s was like that. It was. And then you look at his time as a USC linebacker, he always made, first team all Pac-12 or Pac-10 at the time, excuse me, except for his senior season where he was second team all Pac-10. Because the winner of, I think it was the Lombardi Award for best linebacker was in the Pac-10 and it wasn't him. So like that was the only reason that he wasn't first team all Pac-10 that season. He was spectacular. He ends up getting drafted in the 3rd round and he ends up playing in the NFL for a number of seasons. And he ends up being, I think, a, reasonably successful guy. He ends up playing in over 100 games, over 1,000 tackles. I mean, like, good player in the NFL, drafted by the Saints, went to the Chiefs, Cowboys, fuck that. The Vikings for 3 years, led them in tackles all 3 years. And then he pretty quickly transitioned into coaching, where he got picked up by Mike Ditka for the New Orleans Saints. And he was there for a couple of years, was never the defensive coordinator over there, but was a linebackers coach. Then in 1999, goes to the Baltimore Ravens and is there in 2000 when they end up having that insane defense. Okay, so he does.
Coach, yep.
Oh my God, linebackers coach over there. I would say he gets a little bit of credit for that. For example, he's there till 2001. Then he's the Panthers defensive coordinator in 2002. And then in 2003 becomes the head coach. He did such a good job in Carolina, where his defense was ranked second immediately. Defense is ranked second in the NFL, that he becomes the Jaguars head coach. Fun story there. He has the mantra chopping some wood, and he would bring in a stump and an axe and would have his players chop it, get people fired up. You know how it is in football. This is just what you do. This is a man's game. That's what happens. And what ends up occurring is don't hand. Sorry, I know, Pat, for the brand, etc., but don't hand an axe to a punter, because Chris Hansen ends up missing the stump, hits his non-kicking leg, and is out for the season. So, rush to the hospital.
It's still my favorite football story, maybe.
I mean, incredible. And the quote that Jack Del Rio had, because it was happening during player position meetings, was, well, specialists have more time on their hands. That's sort of why we did that. And so, I mean, in that respect, a likable guy. I love that story. He's Jaguars head coach for 9 years. I mean, the guy has been around the NFL for a long time. He's been a head coach for a long time. He was a linebacker. Ron Rivera was a linebacker. You look at that first round pick with Jamin Davis, that should still give you hope. I know he didn't have the rookie year that we all wanted him to have, but when you have those two guys picking and they both go, okay, yeah, let's go Jamin Davis, and they're on the same page, and that's an assumption, but if they are on the same page, hey, a lot to be excited about still with Jamin. I mean, you look at his size, you look at his speed, athleticism, he's just working on the instincts, like a lot to be excited about there. So now, KDot, the question is, Gave you guys a lot there, by the way. Thanks for listening. The question is, how do you feel about the 2022 defense for the Washington Commanders so far? We still got the draft to go, but what are your thoughts?
Missing a linebacker.
Missing a linebacker.
Unless he can, I like our guy Cole, man. I like Cole, but it feels as though there's certain, from a physicality standpoint, he doesn't necessarily have that I really want to see from like the middle linebacker position. I just think there's got to be some things that get moved around, and we haven't addressed linebacker in free agency really. I don't know what that looks like, especially, and I find it hard on a defense that Jack Del Rio played linebacker, Ron Rivera played linebacker. Like I'd expect that to be something that real. And if you look at a lot of those teams that Jack Del Rio had, look, when he was a head coach, those defenses usually kind of faltered a bit if you especially look at their ranking compared to when he's the full-fledged defense coordinator. And I think everybody is in the same page that he's a better defense coordinator than he's ever been a head coach. Although he's a head coach that a lot of guys love. When he got the head coaching gig in Oakland, when he got canned from there was a lot of players that were like, yo, we didn't want him to go. This was somebody that we really like, even though we had the rough season, we didn't think it was his fault. And they really went to bat for him. But you look at all those years, there's always been some real special guys in the middle linebacker position, which I still think is a glaring need for this team, unless one of these guys really step up. Maybe they see somebody in the draft that they think they can plug and play. I think Davis, if that was the thought that they were going to plug and play him, then they were wrong there. And I don't know if I think Davis has potential as something. I just don't know exactly what it will be. I think it'll probably be something in coverage, but I need somebody who's a true Mike in that 4-3, really calling that defense. And I don't think we have that guy just yet. But other than that, I mean, I expect this defense to take another step in the right direction as long as health is there for us. Montez Sweat is a guy who, look, for the most part, when he gets drafted, we see the stats out of the combine. He's kind of a one-trick pony. And there was a thought that he was going to be somebody that was kind of a project for a few years to get the full potential you get out of Montez. I think Montez is getting better. And I think that that's something that we got to keep an eye on. I just want to make sure he and Chase don't pull the Brian Orakpo, which is I only have one move. I'm only going to do the one move. Guys are holding me every play. You're not calling the hole, and the refs look at it. Do something else, Brian. I don't know. But I just think that this team right now, like I look at Scott Turner, I look at that offense, I look at what Ron Rivera's at. This third season is going to be a big one. And I think the pressure's on Del Rio more than it is on anybody else on the coaching staff in order to get something out of his squad.
Yeah, totally agree there. And you look at a couple of the names at linebacker that'll probably be first round picks. You've got Devin Lloyd out of Utah. You've got Nakobe Dean out of Georgia. Are you considering either one of those guys at pick 11? Nakobe Dean seems to be going a bit later in the 20s, but if it's your guy, it's your guy, right? Like, is that someone you would consider with the round one pick, filling that linebacker? There's
nobody that's screaming off the page that I love like that, right? This doesn't feel like Luke Kuechly at Boston College. Like, sure. It doesn't feel as though there's a guy I can say, oh my God, we need to have him on this team right now, right? So if I see that I'm like, no, I still go Chris Olave or Kyle Hamilton, or some people are saying Garrett Wilson might fall, which I think is ridiculous. But if that happens, yeah, I'm probably going to go with one of those guys over anything else. Because while I am a believer that the draft is kind of overrated, and I do believe that if you have a guy you like, just go get the guy. I just don't have anybody from linebacker in the draft right now that really screams out to me that I love.
Yeah. That's fair. And so just to quickly recap a point you had made in his second season. So he was defensive coordinator with the Broncos and Super Bowl champion with the Broncos for 3 years. Where was he a Super Bowl champion now that I think about it? Anyway, 3 years defensive coordinator with the Denver Broncos, and first year, second in the NFL, second year, 19th in the NFL, third year, third in the NFL. So, I mean, he's shown in that very small sample size the ability to adjust, bounce back. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that we have a good season out of our defense. Also, the addition of Carson Wentz should help, as we were saying. Offense and defense are connected there. But we're going to have to wait and see, like everyone is with their teams. But I do think that if they can figure out that linebacker position, like you're talking about, KDot, and if, let's say, we added a Kyle Hamilton, my God, I mean, that it is an incredibly talented defense. We spent a lot on that defense, and we've got some really good defensive minds in the building. So, yeah,
and Kyle Hamilton and Landon Collins.
Could
like,
he could come back
with certain things like that. Like, I think there's some interesting things that could happen, and I don't believe he got that Super Bowl with Denver.
I think he was a year off. I believe Denver was 2015.
2015, because Wade Phillips steps in, a defense coordinator there.
You're right. That was a Wade Phillips defense. So he was just before
he just missed it because he just got the head coaching gig.
You know what he did? He paved the road.
Oh no, I think that's a definite thing. I mean, you even look at his first gig in Carolina. That defense ends up being a top 5 defense.
Oh yeah,
top 3.
Mm-hmm.
The year before they were 31st ranked and they won 1 game. So like, I'm just saying, like, now, don't be wrong, that defense had Mike Rucker, Chris Jenkins,
Julius Peppers.
They had some guys.
For
but
sure.
Yeah, there's some nasty guys on the defense. But they went from 31st to top 5. You can tell he knows what he's doing, and that's all. He can get you something out of talent, and I just think right now, no excuses. I don't need to see the lull that we had at the beginning of last year, because if these guys have learned, they should be more disciplined. And that was the thing that everybody, when Jack Del Rio was in press conference and everything last year, and they would ask him what's going on with the defense. Nothing's wrong with the defense. We're just not executing. Right. Yeah. It's just like, nothing's wrong. No, we don't need to go back to the drawing board. And I didn't like it didn't feel like the sense of urgency was there. He was lighting a fire under the guys in the locker room to like get their shit straight. It was kind of like those years that LeVar used to do his freelancing, and you had defense go like, fuck that. I can't stand this shit. We're not doing this. I don't know what it was. Maybe he's looking at the long game when it came to those front 4 guys, as far as getting them to understand, like, hey, you can do it your way and look at how it didn't work, or you can do it my way and look at the results we'll get. So I don't know. I don't know if it's some grand Yoda scheme that he's got going or whatever, but we have to see a huge improvement in the ranking compared to last
year. Yeah, and as we've noted, it is certainly possible that will occur. And I'm optimistic. I think it will happen as well, because even heading into year 2 for Chase Young, for example, he wasn't at OTAs. He was, Ron Rivera mentioned that numerous times. I think, there were commercial deals, and Chase even acknowledged, he's like, why wouldn't I take those? Like, I was just named rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. Why wouldn't I enjoy that? I believe in my talent, things like that. But this year he's already said, hey, I'm going to be at OTA. So you could see that the defense is buying in with Chase as a leader, for example. And Jack's still over there knowing his stuff. He's been around good linebackers like KDot mentioned. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think this defense is going to be great. Any final thoughts on Del Rio before we move on to?
If it doesn't work out, Wade Phillips is sitting on a beach somewhere.
And then we're going to win a Super Bowl based on that. Right. Yeah. So, we're getting a Super Bowl very, very soon is, I think, the conclusion over there. Well, it would certainly speed things up if we had a new owner. So Dan Snyder has had you like that transition? Yeah. That was solid. Yeah, I appreciate that. So Dan Snyder, more allegations have come out. And so Jason Friedman, I'm sure you guys have all heard the name, but if you haven't, vice president of sales and I believe customer service, has gone forward to the Committee of Oversight and Reform, and he provided a testimony. And so in that, he mentioned that, hey, I'm tired of hiding the truth and I don't want to protect Dan Snyder anymore. Mind you, look, my opinion is I want this all to be true because it's chaotic. It's fun in that respect. When it comes to the ticket sales, because it'll get the guy out. But these are allegations, and it's important to note that. Okay. What you laughing about? Anyway. So, yeah. All right. So what he has said is 2 major things came out of what Jason Friedman had mentioned. One, that Dan Snyder, under the direction of Dan Snyder, and some of the people under him, that they were actually hiding money that was due to the NFL and therefore would affect other NFL owners' top line and their ability to create a more accurate salary cap. That was 1. And 2, holding refundable security deposits after the death of Jack Kent Cooke and making it look like a DMV. Just making it as hard as possible to get that permit, to get that provisional, to change your address, whatever. that was the equivalent. He's like, listen, we were ordered to make it incredibly difficult for people to get those refundable security deposits. We wouldn't even mention that they were due that money back, for example. And until they saw that there was some state law that said, yeah, you actually have to let people know. And they did for some of those people. So
including Roger Goodell before he was commissioner.
You know, this story is insane. The story is absolutely insane because one of those security deposits was held by a Goodell, Roger. He's got 2 seats. Like, it's weird. And it was before he became commissioner. So you're just looking at this and like, what the hell is going on? Like, this story at this point is hilarious. I mean, it really is. And people are like, oh, it's still not enough. I'm like, what? Like, what becomes enough? This guy has done everything. Absolutely everything. KDot, when that article dropped, when these allegations dropped, what were your thoughts? And then I'll get into simplifying the money that he actually hid from the NFL.
I went from 6 to midnight, baby. Like, it was fucking dope. I was like, I've never rooted harder for a guy to crash and burn in this asshole.
I know.
And we said it last week. Like, everything that happens is me basically saying, oh, this is not, look, I hate making this analogy, but it's the only one I can come up with. And I know, especially when it comes to Commanders, I probably shouldn't be making this analogy, but I'm going to. I feel like a battered woman in a terrible relationship, or a battered guy. Like, let's keep it equal. I feel like a battered guy in a relationship where everybody's asking why didn't I leave, and I'm like, I don't believe that anybody's going to be able to fix this. I think that this is just the way life is going to be. There's no way out. It's what it is. And I've come to terms with it, I guess, to a certain degree, which is why I never believed that anything's enough to oust this fucker, right? Like, it's just, yeah, you guys are going to care for a little bit, and then you're all going to go off and do your own things, and then he's going to punch me in the fucking face again, and I'm still going to be here because I've got no other options, and I'm from the city, and I don't want to go anywhere because I like this. This is what's going to happen. And we've never come closer to this actually being something that he's got to go.
Right.
And this excites the absolute fucking shit out of me. Mm-hmm. And you can see all the pieces lining up where everybody's basically being able to take care of their own self-interest. Nobody has to be out there and take any big chances or have to be able to stand up for anything necessarily right. This is all bitter bullshit. The sexual harassment allegations aren't enough, but steal a billionaire's money.
Yeah. It's not insane. Just the way the world's constructed.
But that's how you know the things will change, is that when you start looking at who's interested in this and, oh, this is something they'll actually care about because it involves them. You're seeing everything kind of line up. You're seeing the league being able to say, like, look, the initial Beth Wilkinson thing, we fucked that up. We had no idea that Dan Snyder allegedly was going to release the emails about Bruce Allen to try to scorch earth things. So now when people start asking, well, hold on, what about the Beth Wilkinson? What, you guys levied the $10 million fine? Was there anything else? It was all oral. There's no paperwork. Leave us alone. They know they fucked up, and they know that if everybody has the opportunity to go over all that stuff, they look bad. It looks like the Ray Rice situation. It looks like all kinds of other things. Or it also just looks like the league is trying to protect the owners from also being accused by necessarily a former employee and then them having to do an investigation of somebody maybe getting ousted. They're protecting that.
Right.
They get a second crack with the Tiffany Johnston allegation. You hear Goodell say, whoa, that was not in the original investigation, so I guess we can open this door back up. And you see, and he does it lightly, but he's like, hey, we get to do this again. And you hear, it's kind of like an opening volley to Dan. It's like, look, if you fuck with us, we still have the opportunity to really, really go after you on this thing because it's something new. And the public doesn't get to beat us up over the new thing, because then we can do the right thing behind this thing. But you still see the leagues kind of, they don't necessarily want to do that, right?
Right.
And now you have the situation where this guy might have been stealing money from the owners and the fans and the players and all kinds of stuff. But now you have the league is able to sit back and say, let's tack this on the investigation we already have going. But you know what the league also gets to do? Because Congress is involved and because some of this shit is actually looking like it's illegal. Hey, Dan, we ain't got to do shit. We don't have to do anything. We're going to sit right here, wait for the entire investigation to kind of take its course. We got to worry about sitting in the courthouse with you as your fighting hand to keep your team. Let's see how the legal process works out on this thing. And that might be enough to oust them. So the league gets to have their cake and eat it too. Like it's just working out in this way where it looks like nobody's innocent really fully, especially if you're looking at the NFL, right? But they can get what they want, which is this asshole that they want gone, who I think is blackmailing, allegedly, the rest of the league as far as what information he has. They can get rid of him, and they can. There's just so much. Like, even now I'm thinking about that, there's the other angle of, look, the most uncomfortable thing in the Bruce Allen email saga to me was how cozy Jeff Pash was.
Oh, yeah.
To our front office. If I'm an owner, if I'm the Maras in New York, how was he able to do this? Who is supposed to be responsible for making sure this doesn't happen? Like, you guys have no safeguards in place to make sure that this doesn't happen? Because you got to think, we're not here at this particular point in time unless everything else happens up until this point. The email has to get John Gruden has to get sacked. All this shit has to happen to get us to this particular point. If you're an owner in the league, you're saying, how is it fucking possible that he was able to do that? Number one, if it was able to, why can't I do it? Or number two, who in the league office is in cahoots with him or is too buddy with him that have allowed this thing to get overlooked? There's questions that need to be answered across the board, whether the league wants to not look incompetent because they allowed something like this to happen, or look criminally negligent in the sense of they were part of it. Either way, it doesn't look good for them, and they need to see it resolved as soon as possible.
And I'm still curious to see what Roger Goodell's name was doing on that security deposit spreadsheet that Jason Friedman had shared. And this is, again, before he was commissioner. I'm not saying he did anything wrong. It's just a very curious name to have on that spreadsheet. I'd be curious because it also seemed like the NFL front office just in general had some dream seats as well. These were security deposits for premium seats. This was helping with the FedExField move, things like that. Couple quick notes. One, it is absolutely hilarious how the national media will sometimes just come and be like, oh my God, how is this possible? Like, he's definitely going to be gone. And everyone here is pretty hip to it. We're like, yep, just wait. He'll be fine. It's just this is just business as usual over here. It's just another thing. And then the national media goes away over time because, well, only so much time and attention can be spent on something like that. The other fun fact, as you were mentioning the emails, I had forgotten, the head coach of the Oakland Raiders before John Gruden was one Jack Del Rio. So Jack Del Rio actually leaving and then Gruden having his emails with Bruce Allen sort of started this whole thing. So that's just a sort of interesting note over there. This is the Jack Del Rio episode, of course. And I just wanted to mention the way that, because when I was reading, so I read the letter from the Committee on Oversight and Reform to the FTC saying, hey, please look into this. The way that I could best think of it is that the Commanders and all NFL teams are selling tickets, right, to their games, and they're making a certain amount of money. And in this case, there is a system price, and that is what the NFL can see. Okay. So that was $44 in the example that Jason Friedman described. Pretend the Commanders are playing the Chiefs. They're selling tickets for $44 according to the system. What they were actually doing, what the fans were seeing, was a $55 amount. And the fans would end up paying the $55. And if they did that thousands of times, well, then there would be a certain amount of surplus, right? So if they were selling at 44, they get a certain amount. At 55, they're getting an extra amount. The difference is what they called the juice. And that juice would end up getting moved to other events that happen at FedExField. For example, a college football game or a concert. And so they would take that extra money, tell the NFL they sold it at $44 a ticket, and would say, this juice, this surplus that we made by selling at this price instead of this price, we're going to say we got that from the Penn State Maryland game. We're going to say we got that from the Rihanna concert, whatever you want to say. Kenny Chesney was the name that he used, right? That is what is being alleged over here. And I hope that made sense. That was the best way I could think of it.
No, you nailed it.
Yeah. And so that's wild. And I wonder if other NFL owners are like, oh shit, we were doing the same thing. I have no idea.
I want to rewind for a second on that part of it and think about it from a football perspective too.
Sure.
How many years? I remember being unless this is like the Mandela effect or whatever, and I just don't remember or I'm misremembering history.
Mm-hmm.
All those years that we had all the injuries happening at FedEx because of the conditions of the field. And when we were told that it was because during the offseason or even during the season, they had all these concerts, shows, all kinds of shit at FedEx. And there used to be reporters who used to ask the front office, hey, is this really necessary to be doing all these shows at this clip when you have to take care of the ground for the football team? And it was, no, this is a huge part of what it is we do. This is a huge part of keeping the operating costs and everything. We have to be able to do this to have it be a mixed-use stadium, this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, fuckers, you wanted your slush fund to continue being there. And what did it do? Wreaked havoc on our team. Because all those shows and all those things that were happening at FedEx, that they didn't do a good enough job upkeeping the grounds. They never did a good enough job replacing the grass or replacing the dirt when all these stages used to constantly get brought out and put out there on the front. I'm just saying there's every which way you look as far as all the pieces matter. He never gave two shits. The more they come out, the more you realize he doesn't give two shits about anything that's happening on the field as much as he cares about lining his pockets. And the thing is, he's not like he knows he's incapable of lining his pockets by putting together a winning team like the New England Patriots might do. Like, sure. How about we become a very, very valuable franchise by selling jerseys but just being a winner? No, I'm going to be the sleaziest scumbag that I possibly can do, a nickel and dime everybody, which is what we all should have known when he was suing grandmothers.
Yep.
For season tickets. When people say nasty things about him, he's filing lawsuits in India to try to get fucking Discovery to bury you. He's a piece of shit.
He was about to run the investigation on the Tiffany Johnston allegations. You remember that? He was like, "Oh yeah, we are opening up." And again, the Commanders equals Dan Snyder. So whenever you see the Commanders did something, Dan Snyder did that thing, right? So he's the owner, 100%. He is the owner.
Yep.
So when the Commanders are opening up an investigation against Tiffany Johnston, well, you're like, okay, well, Dan Snyder is literally like, what the fuck did you just say? Like, that is literally what that is. And so it was fun to see Roger Goodell be like, no, they are not running that. Are you kidding me? No, they're not running that investigation. That's absolutely absurd. But that's the way he thinks.
Yeah.
That seems to be the way he thinks. And I don't think that suddenly he had a change of heart, in 2017 or 2018, where he's like, you know what we're doing? Wrong. It's just so wrong. And those security deposits that we're still holding on to, let's give those back, because that didn't happen. They still have that money. Up to $5 million across 2,000 different customers has been kept in refundable security deposits.
If anyone's of the idea that Dan has done anything out of the goodness of his heart, I don't understand how you could be so blind.
I know.
The name change didn't happen until you had advertisers saying that they were going to fucking start backing up. We start having state politicians or the local politicians say, hey, the stadium's a moot point unless they change the name. When you start seeing that shit starting to dry up, when you start realizing that there was enough, or he's fallen out of favor with guys like Bruce Allen or other guys in the front office, or he knows that there are sexual harassment things that are about to come down the pipeline. So you hire Brian LaFemina, who you can't necessarily hide these things from if he's going to be the true guy that's going to be the team president. And he's probably going to whistleblow. So what do? Oh, I guess we got to stop doing some of the things that we're doing right now just so that we don't get caught. He's never doing anything and it's another thing. I bring up Brian LaFemina a lot. He got fired the day before Christmas because they said that there wasn't enough revenue coming in from, and I just thought about this.
Wow.
There wasn't enough revenue coming in. And my thought is it kind of works out timeline wise to when they probably stop doing the juice thing as much as they have been. So when he's looking at the bottom line as far as how much money is hitting into those accounts.
That's interesting.
So like I need subpoenas to go flying.
And they have begun.
I know.
They have begun.
If LaFemina is not in anybody, they need to bring his ass there, especially because of like the committees and stuff that he's on now and what he's been doing the last few years. I'm sure he'd love the opportunity to. But just like Jason Friedman has, They've all signed NDAs when they're leaving, and they need a subpoena in order to be able to break the NDA. They can't actively go out there like, hey, guys, you might want to talk to me. No, they're not allowed to talk about this shit in public.
Right.
There needs to be a lot of subpoenas for everybody that was there in that organization for those time periods. Because here's the other thing. You're going to get a lot of truth. These guys could have been out here slinging mud on Dan Snyder for the last how many years, and they haven't been. But you know what? There's probably a lot of fucking stories. I know me and you have heard them from people that have worked out of Ashburn, that have been low on the totem pole. Lord knows what happens when you go higher up.
Yeah, absolutely. One final note. November elections are coming up. That is very, very important because if Congress turns red, there is a very good chance that this investigation gets dropped entirely. So if you are a Republican listening to this, if you could hold off for just like 2 years or something like that, vote blue this time. Let's get this guy out. And if you need to go back to voting red, I understand it's a free country. Okay. But for now, let's all unite. Let's get this dude out. And you can go back to voting red, do your thing. All right.
I got so much I want to say right now.
I know you do. That was more for you than anybody else. It's not like you vote red. I was just like, this is going to antagonize Kate.
Nah, because I see these goddamn fans. It's a witch hunt. They're just trying to grasp at straws to get Dan Snyder. It's goddamn. Shouldn't they be worried about the gas prices? Motherfuckers.
It's like, you're right. Let's focus on that.
It's like, are you really fans of this team?
Right.
Are you really fans of this team?
Come
on, man. Like, throw the politics to the wayside. Look, I didn't even bring up Jack Del Rio's politics yet. I wanted
Great
to.
Job.
I did.
Great job.
Right? Thank you. There's, but come on. If you're a fan of this team, search hard in your soul. You cannot be rooting for Dan Snyder. You can't.
Can't do
It's
it.
an impossibility. Who the fuck, if you were doing that, and I'm going to say this every episode that we talk about this shit, you need some severe self-evaluating. If you were ever on the side of Dan Snyder, you really got to think this shit through. It's not the right side to be on.
It is not. It is
You want to be the asshole after the American Revolution, being the one talking about, the king was amazing. I don't know why we ended up. You don't want to be that asshole that everybody remembers when the shit goes down, right? You want to be the assholes. England never did anything. I remember what you said, Steve. I remember what you said last year. You remember, buddy? Keep that same energy, asshole. Keep that same energy.
Well, now I'm thinking about, could you imagine if Twitter existed in 1776? Like,
the
the stuff, the receipts would be unbelievable. Would we even be? We probably wouldn't be here.
Dude,
anyway,
one more. There's a shit that happens in my community, which is that a lot of black people don't want to talk about the shit. And it's uncomfortable as fuck. When you start realizing that a lot of your grandparents actually wanted Martin Luther King to shut the fuck up because he's making things back. Like, when those conversations go, you don't want to be the guy on that side of history. Don't do this here. This is not the hill to die on. Not with this guy. Don't do it. Do not do it. It makes us all look bad. Look, we all had, in 2006, 2005, you could go back on all of our Facebooks. We were all saying that the R word was fine. I get it. We have to eat that. All right. We have to eat that. We got to take that. We got to understand. All right, we were wrong. This is what it is. We can't do it this many times. We got to pick our battles. We're bad enough. We got to pick our battles.
And I'm going to do the right thing and just let that be. But thank you for that, KDot. We got to wrap the show up. But before we do, wanted to talk about Dwayne Haskins, who we actually mentioned on last week's episode as a quarterback that Scott Turner had coached. So that the timing was coincidental in that respect. But yeah, Dwayne passed away last week, and that was a real shock to everybody. And I know it was for me, for KDot, for everybody, because he was just 24 years old, and it's too young, quite simply too young. He passed away because he was hit by a truck on the highway at 6:30 in the morning. He was actually working out with the, Pittsburgh Steelers receivers and Najee Harris running backs and stuff like that. And just, Dwayne, rest in peace, and thoughts and prayers to your family, because 24 is just too young at the end of the day, and I don't know, KDot, what are some of your thoughts here? Anything you'd like to say?
Absolute tragedy. I mean, I don't think there's any Washington fans that wanted anything bad to ever happen to Dwayne. We were all rooting for him. It just didn't work out here. I know if I speak for a lot of Washington fans, where we thought that him ending up in Pittsburgh was the absolute best thing that possibly happened to him, with you having a Mike Tomlin who's a guy who's going to get the best out of you and actually be like a leader of men in that locker room. You see that Dwayne was moving in the right direction. I feel terrible for his family. I feel terrible for his friends. When you see the impact it had on like a Chase Claypool, who very, very vulnerable, released a video of him in the car kind of reacting to it. Even you hear the statement of Terry McLaurin. There are a lot of guys that have known this dude and they don't have any bad things to say about him, and the impact that it's had for especially this guy this young. These guys have experienced entirely too much loss, even in the Washington locker room over the last few years. It sucks. Tragic accident. And it's one of those things where we were just celebrating Sean Taylor's birthday not so long ago. And you think about that wasted potential, and not just as football players, but as men. And he just got married. Same as Sean just had a kid. Like, it's just, it sucks. It just sucks.
And even if, and I know I had made the work ethic comment last week, like, this isn't even about that. Like 24 is just too young. And it was, I know Schefter made the mistake. And then he on his podcast apologized for saying, hey, that's not the time or place to talk about someone struggling as a pro or anything like that.
Totally right.
But I loved the apology because then he started getting into some of the details, and like, everyone's rooting for him. That's one. Two, he had a great relationship with Mike Tomlin, and he was working. I mean, absolutely working. And so the irony that, like, he had this label and he was working hard to shed that, right? Like, the lack of work ethic, and that's where he is, every single day. They were talking about every single day he's putting in the work and stuff like that. It is absolutely tragic to see not only 24 being too young, but the way in which it happened, right? He's bettering himself. He's making a name for himself. Rest in peace, Dwayne. And just thoughts and prayers to the family once again. That is truly tragic. And yeah, I mean, Washington fans had it with Sean Taylor as well. So it's unfortunate to see another person close to the organization have to go through something like this. I believe there is a where is it? It's at Bullis, April 24th at 7 p.m. I think you can go pay your respects for Dwayne. So for those that are local listening, you have the opportunity to do that. But yeah, a bit of a somber note to end on, but thank you guys for listening. This was District Divided, DC Sports Podcast. Always home for hating on Dan Snyder. Always home for information about, some of the coaches, some of, the stuff behind the scenes, and just trying to get you that insight as much as possible on the Commanders and things like that. So I'm Amit, that is KDot. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next Thursday, where honestly, I think we more or less concluded talking about each coach. And so I guess we're gearing up for the draft. So we'll see you next Friday at 2 p.m. Take it easy.